Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to this video where today I'll be introducing my next kind of playlist. I'm going to be talking about Deep Purple. Now, that's probably a little bit of a departure from what I normally chat about on the channel. Obviously, I've historically, focused on the proggy or the artsy side of things. And Deep Purple is kind of exists outside of all that, I think. Although there is obviously, a pretty decent circle of fans that would argue that Deep Purple are very much prog related at the very least. And I would agree to that, but Purple, of course, is much more known for being one of the pioneering bands of metal music in the early '70s. So a little bit different, but it's all good music, right? I just talk about my favorite bands on this channel. I can talk about whatever I want. But I do have a very long history of listening to Purple. In fact, one of my earliest ever musical memories is my dad playing me "Smoke on the Water" on his turntable when I was about 3 or 4 years old. So, pretty impressionable age, and hearing that riff at that age certainly leaves a mark. And then a little bit later on, when I was learning the drums and first kind of got into music and playing and like listening to music. Deep Purple was kind of my first real obsession. They were the first band that I developed this compulsive inclination to collect their entire discography and learn everything about them, and this, that, and the other thing. So, it is very appropriate that I chat about Purple on this channel. So, yeah, like I said, their real claim to fame is being, one of the, a part of the big three in terms of, laying down the foundation for what becomes metal later on. The big three are obviously Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple. Zeppelin and Sabbath are the easiest bands you can compare to because they're pretty much direct contemporaries. They come from the same country. They all kind of start up within the same 3 or 4 years, and at the time they were three of the heaviest bands out there. They were all pushing rock music to this new extreme, which again just continues developing, and we've got a whole new genre of music out of it. Of those three bands, I think it's fair to say that Deep Purple probably have the least cultural impact. Led Zeppelin is obviously over the years they've escalated to this kind of almost legendary or mythic status in terms of bands from the '70s. And same goes for Black Sabbath. Nobody can deny that like such a huge percentage of the DNA of metal music can be traced to Black Sabbath, and particularly Tony Iommi's riffs. Sabbath really does set the tone and style and attitude and look of what becomes metal music. So, they're hugely influential, of course, and the songwriting partnership of Page and Plant is what cements Led Zeppelin as gives them that legendary status, right? But and that's kind of how it is. I mean, like Deep Purple's got "Smoke on the Water," "Highway Star," "Lazy." There's a lot of legendary songs, but Purple never had a "Stairway to Heaven," for example, and that's why they're never quite going to be looked at in the same light as a Zeppelin or a Sabbath. However, my argument, which will probably be like the theme throughout this whole playlist, is that I think Purple was the best band of those three. Even though they might not be the strongest songwriters, they may not have had the most influence in terms of how metal music would later develop. As a unit, I don't think Zeppelin or Sabbath could touch Purple in terms of just the players, the way that the band was able to improvise, the influence that the players had on their respective instruments. Um, I think Deep Purple is ahead of those other major bands in that early heavy scene. Um, I think a lot of that has to do with the live performances, particularly in the early '70s. The Mark II, Mark III lineups, when they would do these kind of frantic jams where it's not really total full improvisation. It's not like King Crimson in the early mid '70s, where they're doing pure improvisation, and all the members are kind of figuring out what to do. With Purple Jams, there is sort of a loose structure to it, and then oftentimes Richie Blackmore and John Lord would be passing solos back and forth, but they would do it in such an intense way where it's almost going off the rails. They get as close to driving the car off the cliff as they possibly can without actually driving it off the cliff. Although sometimes I'm sure it must have happened. I'm sure there was a few train wrecks back in the day, but it's just very, very intense, over the top playing. And I think this is the main reason why I think Purple as a unit, as a band, is arguably was more exciting to watch than a Zeppelin or a Black Sabbath. I can't say, obviously, I never saw Zeppelin. I was -10 when Zeppelin announced their departure from the music world. Haven't seen Sabbath either, although I did see Heaven and Hell when Ronnie James Dio was with us, and that was a cool show. But I think from the live stuff that I've heard from Zeppelin and Sabbath, and it is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to come across like I'm knocking those bands, because I love Zeppelin, I love Sabbath. I feel it just didn't quite get to those same intense levels that Purple was able to achieve in that early '70s period. But I suppose that's a matter of opinion at the end of the day. As far as like the individual instrumentalists, again, it's the same thing. If you compare Richie Blackmore on guitar to Iommi or Jimmy Page, I would argue that Blackmore is probably the better guitar player, at least on a technical level. I also think he probably had more influence on guitar players. Jimmy Page, of course, he's a legend in his own right, but his solo style is often misunderstood. There's a characteristic sloppiness to it, and it's a good sloppy. It fits the vibe of what Zeppelin did, but it'd be pretty hard pressed to find a modern guitar player trying to emulate Jimmy Page's guitar sound. You know what I mean? There's people that can do it, but it didn't. People didn't pick up on it the way they did Richie's style, or Tony Iommi's as well. And Iommi is a hugely influential guitarist as well. You can't deny it. You could probably argue that Tony Iommi's influence is more so in terms of like how riffs are constructed in metal music. Although he's a fantastic soloist as well. I love Iommi's solos, but I find Iommi's solos are very clear and crisp, and they're nicely put together. But there's something about Blackmore's solos where you never quite know where it's going. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But he's always searching, and he's always pushing himself as far as he can possibly go. And I think that makes him, more exciting to listen to and more interesting to listen to. I think Blackmore's influence on guitar players does not get talked about enough. There's so much, from, again, that early '70s period where you can talk about Blackmore's playing. Everything from like the kind of classical influence that he kind of lays down on stuff like Highway Star, and then later with Rainbow, another band I'll probably do a playlist about. But yeah, I feel like Blackmore he kind of shows up shortly after Hendrix sets the world on fire for guitar players, and I really think that Blackmore picks up and carries the torch that Hendrix leaves behind, again more so than his immediate contemporaries, and he never gets talked about enough. You never really hear Blackmore get his due when it comes to guitar playing, and I think there's a reason for that. I think we could probably all agree that Blackmore is well known to be a complete and total asshole. We love him for it. It's just part of his character. He's a dick. I think he puts it on to a certain degree, but there's a lot of very, very funny stories of Blackmore being not very nice, and Deep Purple, they have their own sort of mythology, and Blackmore's bad attitude, pun intended, is probably has a lot to do with all that. But the other major player, of course, we got to talk about if we're talking Deep Purple, is John Lord. Lord's overdriven organ sound is one of the cornerstones of what Deep Purple do, and it's another thing that sets them apart from their immediate contemporaries. There's something so great about that, raunchy, in-your-face organ tone that he achieves when he overdrives it through a Marshall stack, and you know, his organ playing is fantastic. John Lord has incredibly good taste. He's not necessarily all flash, although he can do that kind of stuff. But I find his solos to be very, very tasteful, and you know, I think he's also a total gentleman as well. He was, you know, any interview that I've seen with John Lord, it's, you know, I'd like to have a beer with that guy one day. Unfortunately, obviously, he's long since passed away, but yeah, hugely influential character, and yeah, it's certainly a major hallmark of Deep Purple's sound. Some other things that I think set Purple apart from the other bands. I know I keep going back to Zeppelin and Sabbath, but it's the easiest bands you can make these comparisons to. But I think Deep Purple in their 70s heyday, and I keep talking about Mark II. We're gonna go through all the different lineups as I do these videos, of course. But Deep Purple is considerably less bluesy than Sabbath and Zeppelin. I mean, Zeppelin, of course, you know, their whole gimmick for the first kind of half of their career is that, you know, not really first half of their career, but they were essentially started out as a blues band that just took things to the next level, made it really heavy, made it really crunchy, made it really aggressive. But, you know, for all intents and purposes, Zeppelin is a very heavy bluesy folk band. And same with, you know, Sabbath, though not folky, but, you know, the early Sabbath albums, like, you know, the debut self-titled Black Sabbath album and Paranoid, you know, if you really listen to it, it's just overdriven, heavy blues with some really quirky lyrics, and you know, I forgot if I lost my train of thought. It fell out of my brain. But what I'm trying to say is, yeah, the early Sabbath stuff is very much rooted in blues, and you know, later on they would kind of go on to refine that heavier style or whatever. But blues is such a part of Sabbath's DNA. That's not so much the case with Purple. Deep Purple, you know, does blues as an exception rather than a rule. There are some bluesy songs, you know, songs that have that influence, but I think, you know, when I think of Deep Purple, I think they're more rooted in like kind of 50s rock and roll, but taken to the absolute extreme. It's more of a rock and roll thing than it is a bluesy thing, and I think that kind of makes them unique, and it sets them apart a little bit. And yeah, it's just another one of the reasons why I absolutely love Deep Purple. They're such a fun band. I think it's going to be great to talk about all their albums. I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I know, you know, with my Peter Hamel videos, I'm kind of doing it in chunks. I'll probably do a similar thing with Deep Purple, right? Because there's so many albums they made. You know, rather than, you know, do a single video for, you know, Shades of Deep Purple, Book of Taliesin, you know, self-titled album, I'm just going to do a Mark I video and kind of discuss the albums and the times of Mark I as far as I know them. Then we'll do Mark II. I might do Mark III and IV as one video because I view those albums as a trilogy, possibly controversially, but we'll talk a little bit more about that when I put that video out. And then we'll do Mark II Round 2 in the 80s when they get back together. Mark V with Joe Lynn Turner, which is very strange, but should make for an interesting video. The final Mark II with Battle Rages On. So those will be like single album videos, and then we'll do the Steve Morse stuff and the Don Airey stuff as well. But yeah, I'm gonna you know, do the playlist more so, and each video will be representative of a specific era. But it should still be fun to talk about, and hopefully that's the kind of thing you guys are into, and yeah, should be fun. It'll be nice to have some Deep Purple videos on my channel finally. And yeah, I can't think of anything else to say. If you made it this far in the video, thank you very much. I tried recording this video the other day, and it just wasn't working out, and I think I ended up rambling for well over an hour, so far too long for what's going to be just a little introduction video. But yeah, thanks for bearing with me. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe, but I didn't say that because I'm not a conformist. If you like the video, you know what to do, right? And I'm not really a YouTuber. I'm just some friggin' guy ranting about music that he likes. So, yeah, hope you guys are looking forward to watching some Deep Purple videos, and yeah, you can expect them in the future. Until then, take care. Thanks again. Bye-bye.